streets are crowded. She muttered, taking off the hoodie and throwing it away. Her eyes glimmered, seeing the club in front of her. She glanced one last time behind her and barged into the club. The smoke and the toxic alcoholic smell in the air made her cough uncontrollably. She walked towards the bar and sat, looking around. "One spirits, please," she said to the bartender, who nodded. She was impatiently waiting and drank 4 shots in 10 minutes. "One more," she said to the bartender, but this time the bartender had changed. Wine glanced at her wristwatch and let out a sigh. After drinking the last shot, she stood and turned around, but her eyes widened, seeing the familiar figure. "Damn it," she muttered and ran to the private room area. Meanwhile, Martin was holding a file in front of him, reading it aloud and almost running beside 𝐁𝐸, who was listening to him with a poker face until a voice made his steps halt. "Mate," his wolf growled, causing him to frown. "Mate," 𝐁𝐸 gestured for Martin to go. "What's wrong with you, please?" he asked his wolf, looking around the dimly lit area. "Mate, our mate is here." He spoke excitedly. 𝐁𝐸 made his way out, ignoring Blaze when his eyes landed on Wine, who was coming towards him with stumbling feet. "Mate, she's our mate." Blaze growled again. Wine moved closer to him. "Help me," she whispered, and was about to fall, but 𝐁𝐸 held her by the waist. He felt a weird pull towards her. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, patting her face gently. Wine opened her eyes wide, scratching and rubbing her neck. She raised her hand and touched his face. "So handsome," she said with a lustful gaze, and fixed her eyes on his lips. Before 𝐁𝐸 knew, she smashed her lips on his, kissing him hungrily. 𝐁𝐸 was taken aback by her sudden action. As soon as he came back to his senses, he kissed her back with the same hunger and lust. He couldn't resist her. Wine pressed her body against him. 𝐁𝐸 pressed her against the wall and pinned her hands above her head. He was lost, severing her lips until his phone rang, grabbing his attention. He ignored it, but it rang again, causing him to break the kiss. He declined the call and glanced at Wine, who had rested her head against his chest, breathing heavily. He scooped her in his arms and entered the room next to them. Never did anyone have this much impact on him. He laid her on the bed and was about to move back, but Wine held his collar and pulled him closer. She was too drunk to realize what she was doing. She leaned and trailed soft kisses on his neck. 𝐁𝐸 stared at her with desire and passion. "Mate," Blaze growled excitedly once again. 𝐁𝐸 tried hard to ignore him and pull away, but something about her made him want her. He held Wine from the nape of her neck and pulled her away. Wine stared at him with the same desire and passion. 𝐁𝐸 groaned before leaning toward her neck. He sank his teeth into her neck, causing Wine to hiss. Blaze jumped in excitement as soon as 𝐁𝐸 marked her. He pulled away and caressed the mark. 𝐁𝐸 felt as if he had found his other half. With relief, he passionately explored every part of her body to soul. Time skip. Wine was staring at an invisible point with her hand under her chin, lost in deep thought when her friend shook her violently, making her startled. "Ella, act like a human if you're not one," she said through gritted teeth. Ella rolled her eyes. "I have been talking to you for so long now. Where are you lost? Did that stupid fiancé of yours, what's his name? Smith? Yeah, stupid Smith. Did he do something again?" She spoke, moving her chair closer. "I want to go somewhere away from him." She went silent. "Well, that's a bit long story," she said, scratching her neck. "What were you saying?" Ella glared at her suspiciously. "I want to hear that long story. First tell me, what were you saying?" Ella leaned on the chair with a smile. "I saw our boss today. Trust me, Wine, he's so handsome. It's been more than 15 days since you're here, yet you haven't even seen him." Wine waved her hand uninterestedly. "My life is too messed up to focus on the boss," she said with a pout. "Okay, tell me why you're so stressed. What happened?" Ella held her hand. 3 days ago, I was in the coffee shop for my part-time job. Smith came there. He wanted me to go to his house with him, but I refused. Wine looked at her. "You know his gaze makes me uncomfortable." Ella nodded. "He forced me, so I ran away from him. He was chasing me when I went into the club. I don't know how I got drunk. I just drank a spritz. I don't know how I got drunk. My tolerance is not that low and She stopped biting her lips. And what? I'm dying out of curiosity. I ended up in a stranger's bed. She said on the verge of crying. You slept with someone. Wine quickly placed her hand on Ella's mouth. Slow down, I don't want to print it in a magazine. Ella nodded, removed her hand. Who was he? I don't know, I just saw him the next morning, but believe me, words can't describe how handsome he was. No, beautiful, yes, he was beautiful. Ella opened her mouth to speak when Martin's voice interrupted them. This wine sir wants to see you in his office. Come with me. Ella swiftly moved back her chair while Wine stood and followed him nervously. They reached his office, but Martin told her to wait when he entered. After a few moments, he came out and told her to go inside. Wine entered nervously when she heard Jungkook's voice. Knocking the door is just too much effort, right? Wine couldn't see his face as he turned his back on her. Sorry, she muttered and was about to turn around, but he stopped her. It's okay, next time be careful, he said and turned to face her. Wine felt as if the ground was put under her feet. She couldn't believe her eyes. I slept with my boss. She whispered inaudibly, but being a wolf, Jungkook's hearing sense was a lot keener than a normal human's. Well, Miss Wine, I have called you here to talk about something important, he said, coming forward. Wine's heart sank. Yes, sir, please. She composed herself. I have checked your reports. It's been a few days since you joined, but you're quite hardworking. So I have decided to hire you as my personal assistant. Martin is going to be busy these days and you will take his place. He spoke genuinely impressed by her hard work. Wine bit her lips, thinking if he remembered her. Did you hear me? Yes, sir. She nodded vigorously. Good. You have to take care of my breakfast tonight, tea, my office attire tonight, clothes, each and everything. Martin will explain my routine to you. He spoke with a poker face. Wine nodded, staring at him with innocent blue eyes. Jungkook stepped closer to her. I understand, sir. She mumbled, not knowing why she agreed. Jungkook leaned closer to her. Lastly, you will move to my mansion. Her eyes widened. What? She blurred while her face flushed red as the scenes of the night with him flashed before her eyes. Wine swiftly shook her head. He remained silent and stared at her. I know you recognized me. Now tell me, why did you ditch me after seducing me? He said in a dangerously calm tone and held her by the neck, pulling her closer, their breaths intertwining. Wine gasped and stared at him with disbelief. Hello, mister, you took advantage of me when I was drunk. I didn't seduce you, you can't accuse me. She moved his hand and pointed her finger at him while coming back to her quarrelsome tone. Jungkook raised his brows. I'm your boss, you're not mine. He pulled her closer, causing her to bump into his chest. Wine bit her lips, internally face-palming herself. Jungkook caressed the spot on her neck where he had marked her, while the spot itched him, irritating Wine. A sense of tranquility washed over him. Wine wiggled in his grip, but he pulled her even closer. Stop doing that, you're distracting me, he said, releasing her lower lip with his thumb. Wine trembled down to her soul. His touch, his cologne, everything was familiar to her body. Leave me, I'm not your property. That night was just a mistake. She pushed him and said furiously. Jung clenched his fist, glaring at her. His gaze turned dark. Wine gulped, stepping back when his phone rang. He gestured for her to go out while answering the phone furiously. Time skip. Wine told Ella about Jungkook and her promotion. She decided she wouldn't work as his PA as everything would be awkward, but Ella told her she was being impulsive. Faith gave her an opportunity to get rid of Smith and his debt. At least she and her parents would live a better life as the income was triple her current salary. Wine thought for a few days and decided to work as his PA. When Jungkook and Wine arrived at Jung's mansion, she followed him to the mansion. Each and every worker greeted him respectfully. Welcome home, handsome boy. Butler Winston greeted him cheerfully. Jungkook waved his hand. I'm a man, Butler Winston, not a boy. Winston chuckled when his eyes landed on Wine. I see, who is this beautiful lady? My PA, he said coldly. Wine bowed to Winston. I'm Wine, Wine. Nice to meet you. She shook hands with him. Fine, he repeated her name with a smile and looked at Jungkook. Last time I checked, Martin was your PA. The mischievous glint in his eyes didn't go unnoticed by Jungkook. He ignored him and asked, "Where are Mom and Dad?" "They're waiting for you in their room. I wondered if you got a girl out there. I mean, you didn't come home for a week or more." Jungkook chuckled, shaking his head. Winston was the only person in this mansion who was close to him. "I don't let anyone come close to me, you know that." Winston nodded with a smile. Yes, you are a strong man. No one can seduce you." Wine's face flushed red while Jungkook patted Winston's shoulder. "Clean the guest room for her." Winston nodded while Jungkook made his way to his parents' room followed by Wine. He knocked on the door and entered after hearing come in. Wine nervously followed him. "Hello Mom, hello Dad." He bowed in front of them and kissed their hands. Wine also bowed. "Finally you realized you have a house." Mrs. John spoke coolly and glanced at Wine with an unpleasant expression. "How are you, son?" Mr. John asked with a smile. Jungkook opened his mouth to speak, but Mrs. John cut in. "Who is she?" Jungkook glanced at Wine and then at his parents. "My PA, Min Wine." "Where is Martin?" she asked suspiciously, gazing at Wine, who nervously clutched the hem of her shirt. "He has some other work to attend for me," he said with a shrug. Mrs. John nodded, passing him a warning glare. "I'll talk to you later. Now we have to attend a party." She held Mr. John's hand and said with a smile, "Let's go." Mr. John nodded and made his way out while Mrs. John turned cold as soon as her eyes met Jungkook's. At night, Wine stayed in her room the whole day. As all the workers in the mansion passed her weird gazes, Jungkook gave her a day off, so she didn't have anything to do. Then she took a nap and came out of her room. It was 8 p.m. Wine decided to have a tour of this big mansion. She made her way out and roamed all around the garden area. Subconsciously, she moved to the backyard. It was all dark while there seemed to be a forest. With a frown, Wine moved inside. The whole area was surrounded by the trees. It felt as if she entered another world. There was a faint hustle of dry leaves. She stood still, feeling someone's presence. She shook her head, thinking she was being delusional, but then again she heard the same voice, but this time it wasn't as faint as before. Her breath went uneven. She swiftly turned around when she heard a growl. An animal's growl from behind, causing her to flinch. She wrapped her arms around herself and looked around. She was frightened. Wine closed her eyes, breathing heavily. "There's no way here. I could just hear an animal growl," she thought, but then she heard it again. Too close this time. She could feel warm breath on her neck. With a trembling heart, she turned around, barely swallowing her own saliva. As soon as she turned around, blood drained from her face. Her eyes met a pair of black eyes, but it was not of a human. She stared at him in shock. Her eyes moved over the animal, piercing dark eyes, thick black fur, tall limbs, and extremely sharp fangs sticking out of his mouth. It towered above her, looking down at her. She blinked twice in disbelief. Wine found it hard to breathe. Fear had numbed her, kept her fixed on her spot. The black-furred beast charged towards her. Wolf Wine screamed, staggering backwards without caution. Her back collided with the rock-hard floor. Her head hit the ground. The beast's growl grew louder and angrier. "Is anyone there? Help somebody!" she cried. Tears flowed freely through her eyes. She tried to stand up and run, but failed as she felt numb. The hit to her head was severe, but the beast was still charging towards her. She crawled helplessly, tears in her eyes. The beast was faster with every 2 steps she took. It covered with one. It was so close to her now, it gnawed the mouth wide open, exposing its vicious fangs. Wine couldn't breathe anymore. Her breath failed her. She was shivering. Her body vibrated to the intensity that it did not leave space for breathing. Just then, when she thought she was about to lose her right leg to the beast, she heard another howl from her back. The floor beneath her vibrated as another wolf ran towards her. Wine's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. The grey wolf jumped over her feeble frame, towering above the black one, blocking their paths. With the shortness of her breath, Wine couldn't take it anymore, and the darkness enveloped her. Blaze was fuming in rage. He watched his opponent stagger, eyes glistered with shock. Never in their pack a wolf attacked another wolf or a human. He was panting in rage, anger, and fear. If he had been just 1 second late, he would have lost wine. She would have gone forever. The thought itself clawed his chest with sharp daggers. With one swift stride, Blaze charged towards the black wolf and sent him to the ground. The black wolf stared at him in terror. Blaze's almond eyes were dreadfully cold. His vicious fangs stuck out of his mouth, ready to tear the black wolf apart. He sank his fang into his limb. The wolf howled in pain, and Blaze's eyes drifted backward to Wayne's unconscious figure. He freed the black wolf out of his grip and ran towards Wayne, coming back into his human form. Jungkook mind-licked Martin. Wayne is in danger, get a doctor. He spoke as soon as he found the connection. He lifted Wayne and ran to the mansion, leaving the wolf howling in pain. He laid her on the bed when the door opened, revealing Martin. Where's the doctor? Martin could see the fear and anxiety in Jungkook's eyes. On his way, Jungkook gently touched the back of Wayne's head, which was bleeding. Where the hell is he? He muttered, furiously pacing back and forth. But sir, how did Miss Wayne end up in the forest? He asked curiously. Jungkook rubbed his temples. I don't know. I came out of my room to check on her, but I heard her footsteps outside. I followed and found her in front of Gilbert. Martin nodded. That's when the doctor arrived. He checked Wayne's wound on the head and treated it. I'm prescribing a few medicines for her. Make sure she takes them on time and let her rest as much as possible, because human healing takes time, unlike us. Jungkook silently nodded, staring at Wayne's pale face. Martin went to see off the doctor. Jungkook was lost in his thoughts when the door burst open, revealing Mrs. Jung. What the hell you did, Jungkook? You brought a human into our house and injured your cousin for her? She yelled at him furiously. Jungkook stood, letting out a sigh. That's what he gets for harming my people, he said in a serious tone. Mrs. Jung passed him a glare. I need this girl out of my house by tomorrow, or else I won't hesitate to dig my fangs into her neck and end her at once. She spoke through gritted teeth. Jungkook shrugged his shoulders. She works for me, she'll stay wherever I go. Mrs. Jung raised her brows. Are you sure she just works for you? Because I see something else in your eyes for her. She stepped closer to him. Don't forget you're the next Alpha King. I have fixed your marriage with Anna, our Beta's daughter. Right after your coronation, she will be your mate. Jung stared at her blankly. Mrs. Jung turned around to leave, not forgetting to pass Wayne's unconscious figure a death stare. Mr. Jung, who was standing at the door, entered the room. I don't know what's on your mind, Jungkook. I just want to remind you something. Mr. Jung patted Jungkook's shoulder. Humans can't be our mates. Don't forget what they have done to us, especially your brother Reed. Mr. Jung walked out while Jungkook clenched his jaw and sat, throwing his head in his hands. Time skip. Jungkook spent the whole night with Wayne, staring at her unconscious figure. He felt tightness in his chest, thinking what would have happened to her if he hadn't come on time. He let out a sigh and called Martin, who was standing out of the door. Yes, sir. Jungkook leaned on the couch, not taking his eyes off Wayne. Go and bring Richard here. She must not remember anything. Martin hesitated for a moment. Jungkook frowned. What's it? Sir, he might be asleep. Do I look like I care? His cold voice sent chills down his spine. Martin quickly walked out, and after 10 minutes he came back with Rosie Richard. What's it, Hyung? Why would you disturb my beauty sleep? He said, rubbing his eyes. Sleep later, for now disappear her memory of the last few hours. Richard opened his eyes wide and stared at Wayne. Who is she, your lover? What happened to her? He asked, only to earn a death stare from Jungkook. Jungkook gestured for Martin to tell him what happened. Richard shot Jungkook a glance with a smile, who was staring at Wayne with different emotions. I see someone melted ice from my brother's icy cold heart. He spoke teasingly. I'm sure you have a death wish, he muttered. Richard composed himself and glanced at Wayne. Well, this might be temporary. If she went through something similar, she might regain her memories of that incident. He spoke in a serious tone. Jungkook nodded. I won't let her go through it again, he muttered in a determined tone. Richard placed his palm on Wayne's forehead and closed his eyes, mumbling something. His palm radiated a blue light which lit the whole room. After a few moments, the light disappeared and Richard stepped back. She will wake up in a few minutes. Jungkook nodded and sat still. You can go. Richard shook his head in denial. I would would like to meet her first. Jungkook raised his brows. No need to meet her, get lost from here. He shook his head. Wan opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling blankly. She's awake. Richard moved closer to her and helped her sit. How do you feel now? He asked in a soft tone. I'm good. Who are you? What happened to me? She asked, unaware of Jungkook's burning gaze on them. Well, you just fainted while strolling out in the garden and got a minor injury on your head. Wan lightly touched the back of her head. As for me, I am Richard, your boss, younger brother. I see sir is quite arrogant, but you're so different from him. Jungkook clenched his jaw and stood. Enough of your conversation. Wan's face turned crimson, realizing Jungkook was here, while the sight of her flushed face spread a warm feeling through his chest. It's not even dawn yet. Richard, go back to your room and Miss Wan shall rest. I'll give you a few days off. He spoke coldly. Wan bit her lips and nodded while Richard passed her a charming smile and walked out. So sorry for bothering you. I don't know how I fainted. I don't even remember anything, she said with a frown. It's okay, take a rest. He patted her face gently, taking her off guard. Wan stared at his handsome face in a daze. Jungkook walked out, lost in deep thoughts. Time skip. After recovering, Wan resumed her job. She noticed, other than Richard, everyone stares at her weirdly and with a kind of hatred. Jungkook has been busy with work. His cold demeanor sends chills down her spine. Now Wan was in the office working on some important files. She glanced at her wristwatch. It was already 11 p.m. Jungkook had gone to an important meeting, leaving her to work on some important documents, and it's been 15 minutes. He had texted her that he would be back in a few minutes to pick her up. Wan stood hearing footsteps coming closer to her. Sir, these files. Her breath hissed, seeing Smith staring at her with a disgusting smirk. Long time no see, darling. He stepped closer to her. What are you doing here? Don't come close to me, she choked out. Smith chuckled, shaking his head, and stood in front of her. Wan's back touched the wall while her breath went uneven. You ran away from me that day, and now you're living with your boss. He growled the last line and hit her on the face, taking her off guard. Wan gasped, placing her hand on her cheek. You psycho, just go away from me, she yelled and pushed him. Smith grabbed her hair harshly. Bloody bitch, dare to cheat on me, I will chop you. He growled and strangled her. Wan gasped for air, hitting him on the chest while tears rolled down her eyes. She felt her soul trembling out of fear. Her hands fell to her sides. In a blink of an eye, Smith landed on the ground. Bastard, you really have a death wish. Jungkook roared with bloodshot eyes and punched him in the jaw. Smith felt as if his bone was crushed. Wan began coughing while sliding down the wall. Jungkook was throwing blows at Smith, who almost lost consciousness. With one last kick, Jungkook turned towards Wan and rushed to her side. Hey, are you okay? He asked in a soft tone, gently cupping her face. She looked at him weakly and barely nodded. Jungkook clenched his jaw, seeing finger marks on her face and neck. With mind lick, he called Martin over and said to take Smith to his red cell. He scooped Wan in his arms and walked into his office. He sat her on the couch and handed her the glass of water. Wan gulped it in one go. Thank you. Her voice was a bit raspy. Who is he? Do you know him? He asked, holding her hand gently. Wan nodded with a lower head. He is my fiancé, more like forced. She bit her lips to stop her sobs. Cry if you want to, you'll feel better. She let her tears flow freely. Jungkook pulled her close to his chest. She began sobbing hard, clutching his coat. He lightly parted his lips and drew a deep breath, feeling as if someone was slicing his heart. After crying her heart out, Wan snapped and spoke. My parents had taken debt from Smith for my late brother's treatment. Smith kept a condition to pay him back in installments when we were stable enough, and the condition was my engagement to him. My parents knew he was a psycho, so they helped me run away, but he caught me and beat my father so badly that he can't even walk. Her voice was filled with agony and grief. Jungkook tightened his grip around her. Did he abuse you often? He did. He would suspect me of cheating him, jump to a conclusion, and hit me. He even tried to force himself on me. Even the day in the club, I ran away from him and hid in the club. She mumbled, not knowing why she was telling all these things to him. Wan pulled away and stared at him. Thank you, sir. She felt light after speaking to him. Jungkook let out a deep breath fingers through his hair. The fingerprints on her face and neck boiled him in rage. He quietly stood and brought the ointment. I promise he'll pay for each and everything he did to you. He leaned and kissed her cheek softly. Wayne's heartbeat raised wildly. Jungkook trailed soft kisses all over her cheek to the jaw and then over her neck. His touch was familiar to her. Wayne felt her cheeks heating up. She stared at him in a daze as he gently applied the ointment. Few days later, after a few days, Wayne got the news of Smith's brutal death. Ella said he was torn apart by some animal so badly that they couldn't even identify him if not for the blood test. Wayne didn't feel anything after learning about his death. These days she was confused by her feelings for Jungkook. She wants more of him, his touch, his warm embrace. She yearns for everything. He's so close to her yet feels distant. Now Wayne came to Jungkook's bedroom as he had told her to bring his tea. She knocked on the door thrice but got no response. She pushed the door open and stepped in, closing it behind. Her gaze softened, seeing him asleep in his office attire. She moved to the bed, placed the cup on the nightstand, took off his shoes and watched cautiously. Wayne stared at his peaceful face for a while and leaned to take off his coat and tie. Such a deep sleeper. She mumbled with a smile, keeping away his coat and sitting beside him. Wayne placed her hands under her chin and stared at him with an affectionate gaze. When Jungkook frowned and mumbled something in his sleep, Wayne scooted closer to him while his whole body began shaking. "Read," she heard him say. "I didn't kill him. I tried to save him." He was constantly mumbling while his face was drenched in sweat. Wayne wiped his forehead and gently held his left hand in her right, which was placed on his stomach. "It's okay, it's just a nightmare," she said in a hushed tone and caressed his cheek. Jungkook's body went stiff as if trying to recognize her touch. He calmed instantly, tightening his grip on her hand. Wayne let out a sigh and tried to release her hand, but his grip even tightened. She shook her head and subconsciously rested her head on his shoulder with their hands intertwined. She didn't know when she went into deep slumber until she felt his soft touch on her face. Wayne opened her eyes and tilted her head, staring at him in a daze. As soon as she snapped to reality, she swiftly moved back. "I'm so sorry." He held her and pulled her back. "Stay still, it's peaceful." He hushed her and pressed his forehead against hers. Wayne bit her lips, trying hard to control her wild heartbeat. "You were having a nightmare just now," she mumbled, scared he might misunderstand her. He just hummed in response. "I must return to my room," she spoke hesitantly. Jungkook switched his position. The wine was lying beneath him. "Why do you want to run away from me?" She shook her head in denial. "I don't want to." He leaned closer to her, their faces inches away. I want you to be mine forever." She stared at him with wide eyes, her heart thumped against her chest. He leaned and kissed her on the neck where he had marked her. "This is wrong, you're getting married soon." He moved back and stared at her. "You're meant to be mine. Nothing is wrong. I'll get married but to you." She drew a long breath, feeling nervous in his proximity. "How did I end up with you in the club?" She tried to change the subject. "Your drink was spiked." "It was for someone else, but the bartender mistakenly gave you." He buried his face in her neck. As expected, it was spiked. He hummed in response while reluctantly tangled her fingers in his hair. Jungkook let out a satisfying groan. "I can't wait to make you mine," he whispered over her neck. "Your family doesn't seem to like me, mostly your mom and cousin Gilbert. Moreover, we don't know each other," she said in a low tone. "They don't even like me, but who cares? Ignore them and stay away from Gilbert." He kissed her neck. "We have time to know each other," she nodded in response. "You must sleep now, it's 4 in the morning." "This seems the most peaceful night in my life." He inhaled her scent, tightening his grip around her. Time skipped. The following days, Jungkook and Wayne realized their deep feelings for each other. Wayne has been constantly irritated by the dream of wolves. After a few days, Jungkook's coronation is being held. He's confused as to how will he tell Wayne who he really is. Now Jungkook was in his room, feeling a sense of discomfort in his chest and staring out of the window, while Martin was briefing him about the new project when his phone beeped with notifications. With a frown, Jungkook fished out his phone and gestured for Martin to stop. was a video from an unknown number. As soon as he clicked on it, his heart sank. One was bound to the chair with a rope, while two guys were constantly hitting her and cursing. One's cries pierced through his chest. One of the guys tore off her shirt and the video stopped. Jungkook's hands trembled, blood drained from his face. The phone fell from his hands. Where is Wine? Where is she? He growled with bloodshot eyes. I don't know, sir. Mrs. John called her for something this morning. I just saw her going to the servants' quarter. What happened? Jungkook kicked the coffee table. She is kidnapped. Tell Mom that if she is involved, I swear I won't spare her. He roared and rushed out of the room with the speed of his wolf. Martin followed suit. Jungkook followed her scent, and after 1 hour of drive, he arrived at a warehouse and rushed in. The closer he got, the louder he could hear Wine's cries. His heart trembled. Hold on, Wine. I'm here. He muttered and kicked the door open. Wine was barely conscious. She weakly lifted her head and saw Jungkook with blurred vision. How dare you touch my woman, Gilbert? He growled. Gilbert smiled and gestured for his men to attack him. They transformed into their wolves, and so did Martin. Wine's eyes widened, her face turned as white as sheet. Martin fought them while Jungkook moved towards Gilbert. For this human, you almost ripped off my leg. He grabbed Wine by the hair harshly. Leave her, you son of a bitch. With that, he transformed into his wolf and charged towards him while Gilbert also transformed. The past incident flashed before Wine's eyes. She reminisced these were the wolves that she saw in the backyard. Slowly she lost consciousness, and the last thing she heard was Jungkook's voice calling her out. 5 days later. It's been 5 days since Wine was in hospital. Jungkook was going nuts as she hadn't gained consciousness yet. Last night Wine woke up by the time Jungkook had gone. She was scared after discovering Jungkook wasn't a normal human. She pretended to be unconscious as she was weak to run away. Now she heard Jungkook's voice talking to the doctor. Why the hell is she unconscious? What's wrong? He said furiously. Mr. Jones, she's a human. She needs more time to recover. Please keep calm, he said, and took the file from the nurse. She needs to rest well as she's pregnant. Jungkook's eyes widened while Wine's heart thumped quietly. She closed the covers in her fist. Pregnant? Yes, she's 8 weeks pregnant. Jungkook sniffed and frowned. Pups, they're my pups. He muttered with an indescribable feeling. Wine opened her eyes. Pregnant pups. Jungkook rushed to her side. She sat straight. How do you feel? Does it hurt anywhere? Tears rolled down her eyes and she pushed Jungkook's hands. Stay away from me, you're not a human. She mumbled, scooting away from him. Miss Wine, don't panic. You are weak and it might trigger your pregnancy. She wiped her face while Jungkook clenched his fist. Pregnant, that means they're not human. How much are they? She asked in a timid tone. Well, there are 3. They are human, but they have a wolf form like us. You mean you all are wolves here? She glanced at Jungkook with a horrified expression. He gestured for the doctor to go away. Listen to me, Wine. Move away. I want to go back, she cried and stood. Jungkook went towards her with the speed of his wolf and cupped her face. Why are you so scared of me? You can't leave me, not when I have marked you as my mate and you're pregnant with my pups. The spot where he had marked her itched. She shook her head in denial, getting out of his grip. Don't you love me? Her body went stiff. I do, but we belong to different worlds. We can't be together, she cried. He pulled her closer. We are meant to be together. I'm scared, she barely whispered. I'm with you, why are you so scared? He cradled her, caressing her hair gently. I don't know what to do, she muttered over his chest. It's okay, rely on me, I'll not disappoint you, I promise. She snuggled into his chest as if trying to escape the world. After a while she spoke. Is that why your mom hates me because I'm a human? She hates me as well, I'm not even a human. His voice was pained. Why? My older brother was hunted by humans when I was 14. I couldn't save him, that's why mom holds a grudge against humans and me as well. No one in my mansion is human, that's why they showed you weird glances. But I couldn't help it, I wanted you near me. He kissed her temple and walked her to the bed. She'll hate us more, don't think about it, you need to rest. He caressed her swollen cheek. And where is your cousin? I tore him apart in a thread cell. She held his hands. Did you kill Smith as well? He nodded. She let out a sigh and leaned on the bed. I really hit my head, that's why I forget what happened the other day. Richard spelled magic on you and you forget it temporarily. She looked at him with surprise. Don't stress yourself, have some rest. He pressed his forehead with hers and whispered, I'm sorry I was late. It's okay, you still saved me. He kissed her on the forehead, placing his thumb over her jawline. Wedding day. Jungkook gained Wayne's trust all these months. Ella was both shocked and excited after discovering about Jungkook. Wayne gave birth to triplet, a girl and 2 boys. Mrs. John accepted her after knowing Jungkook had mated her. She helped Wayne learn about duties as a lunar queen. On the day of Jungkook's coronation as Alpha King, he marked her again in front of his back. Today it was their wedding day. Wayne's parents and Ella, everyone were present. Jungkook held back and urged to pull her into a kiss after seeing Wayne in her wedding gown. Wayne smiled widely as her dad gave her hand in Jungkook's. They stood in front of each other with wide smiles and affectionate gaze. After the wedding vows, the priest spoke. You may kiss, but Jungkook had already captured her lips, holding her by the waist and the back of her neck. Hyung had some patience. The hall erupted into laughter. He pulled out, holding her close. I have waited so long for this day, he muttered with a smile. Wayne smiled shyly, lowering her gaze. Ella and Richard rushed towards them, holding the little ones. Don't come in my way. She handed Wayne the little boy and girl, pushing Richard slightly, who came in her way, giving the baby to Jungkook. You are coming in my way, bitch, he muttered through a clenched jaw. Ella rolled her eyes. Okay, fine, now don't get started. She said, kissing the little one's forehead while her daughter began crying. Give her to me. Wayne glanced at the little boy in his hand who was fast asleep. She smiled and glanced at the little one in her arms, who was sucking his thumb while the little girl stopped crying as soon as Jungkook held her. They both smiled at each other standing close while Richard captured the picture of their little family.